to the show, Illinois State Representative of the 30th District, Harvey native, and my longtime friend, the Honorable Will Davis. He's been a member of the Illinois General Assembly since 2003, so Rep. Davis knows a lot about Harvey's history. We also have former Second Ward Alderman of Harvey and the current City of Harvey Director of Senior Services, Joseph Whittington, a longtime resident of Harvey and someone who has been heavily invested in the growth of the city over the years, and particularly the quality and life of its seniors. We are so honored to have him. And last but not least, we wanted to be intentional on including a fresh voice from the next generation of public servants. This is a young man that I'm particularly proud of. He's my former Deputy Chief of Staff, and he currently serves as the Environmental Justice Policy and Government Affairs Specialist for the South Suburban Mayors and Managers Association. Please welcome David Clay. We are honored to have all three of them as the guests of our maiden voyage of Let's Talk Harvey. So, let's talk Harvey. Reflecting on our personal connections, let's open up about telling everybody about your own personal connection to the city of Harvey. We'll start with myself. I've been in Harvey for 54 years, and I've been engaged in public service. Well, I don't want to talk too much about my public service for a really long time, let's put it that way. But let me lead it off to you, Rep. Davis. Talk about your connections in the city of Harvey and some of your thoughts.
Well, first of all, Mayor Clark, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your maiden voyage, if you will, and everything that you are doing here in the city of Harvey. So, wow, my Harvey history, I guess that's how I'll state it. Well, being born at Ingalls Hospital in July of 1968, that began my Harvey history, if I can say it that way. But also, you know, having lived and grown up in the city of Harvey, you know, I can honestly say that I am because of Harvey and everything that I experienced here as a kid, growing up, at a time when Harvey was a little different than it is right now. At a time where, you know, you had an active park district, at a time where, you know, you could go to the field house and shoot hoops, you know. They weren't formal after school programs, but that's where we went after school, you know, keep ourselves out of trouble, you know, keep activity going, you know, interact with some of the older guys in Harvey, if you will, you know, but they kept an eye on us. They kept us out of trouble, and they kept us busy. And so my history here is really about, you know, it's easy to call it formative because this is where I grew up, but the person that I am today, in respect to being formative, I am because of the education that I received here, going to public schools here in Harvey, being in the neighborhood that I lived in, on the block that I lived in. When you talk about, you know, the cliche, it takes a village. Well, you know, it really did take a village, or should I say, I really did have a village that took care of me. I was a latchkey. Both my parents worked in the evenings. So at a time certain when my siblings were all older and moved out of the house, yeah, I had to come home by myself, let myself in, and, you know, eat and do homework and watch TV, whatever that was, you know. So, you know, there was that time where, you know, I was on my own, but because of the city of Harvey and the way it was then, that was okay, because I still had my village. I had Mrs. Sanders and Mr. Sanders across the street, had the Myricks in that house, had the Sheltons in that house,
Yep.
Had Joyce Cook in that house, and, you know, and those folks looked after us. It was very easy to see that when you're walking home from school, and I lived kind of in the middle of the block, so as I walked down the block, you see the doors opening, and parents would come stand out on their porches and just kind of keep an eye on us as we walked and watch to make sure we got home, or ask us if we were okay, and, you know, offered something to eat. You know, if you don't have anything to eat, come on back down here, I'll feed you. But that was that real village. You know, we talk about that village today, but in my opinion, that was a real village in terms of raising and your upbringing. So for me, you know, I am truly who I am because of Harvey and what it gave me growing up.
You know, and that was absolutely perfect, because of course, me being a year behind you in age, I experienced the same exact things, and it was those elders who looked out for me, who mentored me, who nurtured me, who took care of me. I was a latchkey kid as well. And because I had so many, I'm going to just say, of us seniors, well, now they're seniors. But at the time, they weren't. They were 30 years old. They were 20 years old. They were those types of people, and they were just basically raising us in an environment that, like you say, you are because of Harvey, that make us who we are today. But that's a perfect, I think, segue onto you, I'm going to say Alderman Whittington, to you, because of not only the work that you do with the seniors, but also being of that age yourself and being one of those who would have influenced us. I remember when we first met. We were both younger and a little less grayer,
right.
But at the same time, I could look to you as a person who I wanted to emulate in government. You could never have too many friends,
Yeah.
And good friends especially. And so you were one of those people who was definitely inspirational. But let's talk about, because you are a part of that village. So let's talk about you and your connections to Harvey and some of your specific, experiences.
Well, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. Moved here on the west side of Chicago and struggled like just about everybody and young African American kids. We moved around to eventually end up out here in Harvey in 1987. I just remember traveling with my parents out here. I bought my brother's house. I remember traveling out here, and this Harvey had Woolworth, and the bus stopped downtown Harvey, and that's how far it would go. And walking around there and going to the different restaurants you can eat here. The schools everybody wanted to go to school here. The schools were outstanding. When I bought my house here, it was a community well run. It was block clubs. People cleaned the streets. They mowed each other's lawn. We all seemed to know exactly when to take the garbage out, and we talked in the streets. We had block club parties, and I was fortunate enough to meet former Alderman John Arrington just by accident. I didn't really want to get in politics at all. I wanted to just be a homeowner, just to raise my family. But my wife encouraged me to meet him, and then I met him. I became what they call an arm bearer. I just started working with him. Then I started meeting all the block club leaders. I call them elders that were young, but they were very experienced. They came from the civil rights, like Mr. Head. I had to humble myself to listen to a man who ran a union. People that were organizing against civil rights. People that were leaders in the community, that were in politics, that were actually having the Little League, volunteering for Little League, Girl Scout programs. There was always something going on in all the schools that we kind of fellowship with. Make a long story short, John Arrington asked me to run. I didn't want to. I didn't think I was qualified for it. And it's because it is a journey of learning how to become a leader. A leader with adults telling you what to do. We had block club meetings constantly. Every week we would have meetings talking about how they wanted to improve, how they wanted to go to the college, to South Suburban College, how are you going to work with Thornton Township, how are you going to get involved with services. So they kind of trained me. Then I got elected, and I met Representative Will Davis, because we're in the same building. Young, sharp, quiet, aggressive person that got things done. He was also in the meetings with our seniors. They had the block clubs. They kind of gave us their ideas, like 159th Street. It was flooding. We had a lot of flooding in this area. And they came up with this project asking Representative Will Davis about it. I think it was $62 million. For me as a young alderman, that was like giving me a turkey. And we got the flooding done. The viaduct used to flood and traffic would go all the way back to the tollway. We got that done. And from that, I started seeing the vision of the elders, what they wanted me to do, because they sat me down and told me what they want me to vote on at city council. They stood up when they taught me to stand up and talk to the mayor, but make sure they stood up. They were letting everybody know that they were supporting this young person, the young state representative, and they had some things they wanted done. In that, I raised 4 kids, became involved with my kids as a parent at the school, then got involved in college with my kids again, and the rest is just had a wonderful time from rags to riches, from the south to the west side, and now I became an alderman. I'm still in that, can't believe it. That's me.
Yeah. I definitely understand that. Wow. Your story, actually, your story probably deserves more time than we have here right now, because there's so much that you've done. I mean, besides being an alderman, you also served in the college board, also served as a representative of District 152, all the things you've done, and you've also written some books as well. So maybe at some point in time we'll have an opportunity to come back and circle and just do a private interview with you, because it's those types of stories that we also like to hear, and they're extremely interesting. By the way, I bought his book, so it's really good and well written. So what about you, Mr. Clay?
Well, it seems that I was born really not just at the turn of the millennium in 1999 at Ingalls, but also at the turn of Harvey. I've got to be honest, I felt very envious hearing some of these stories about the village and how people were looking out for you across the street and offered you food when you went in their home. That's very foreign to me, unfortunately. I like to think, well, I don't like to think, but I do think I grew up in the ruins of a society that was better. And I feel a bit of anger and envy about that. However, instead of allowing that to consume me, I've done everything in my power since I've been born here in the city to improve it, to get to not just that place, but a better place. So where do I begin? Really, my story begins 1999, Ingalls Hospital, August 14th, and my whole life has been Harvey, K through 12, starting at My Angelo, right across the way from me, really, and then going through to Brooks, and then Thornton Township High School, where I did pretty well. Outside of that, I was able to go to Vanderbilt University to get my bachelor's in public policy, and then my master's in public policy from the University of Chicago, all with the intention of coming back to the city and really giving back and improving like how I always believed I should, to get to that point where it felt like the village cared not just about me, but when I do have my family here in Harvey, that they care about them too, the same way they cared about all of you. So my story's short, so I don't have too much to say there.
So actually you have so much more to say and so much more to offer, but when you have people like the 3 of you sitting at this table having these conversations, I know more, and there's so many wonderful things about the 3 of you that once again we could have our own individual conversations and our own individual segments. I am interested about the fact how you expressed that you were basically the ruins of a good society. And but let me ask you this question: how do you think we get back to from whence we came to that point where we have that village? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be either you or someone like you, is going to be a part of that new part of leadership, that comes into the city and begins to make a difference. So what does that look like to you, and what do you think needs to be done in order to bring us back full circle to maybe where we were before, or even better?
Big question, but I do think you can approach it in two ways. I think there's a top level and a bottom level that we really need to be focused on. From a top level, I like to think of any organization as a ship. A well-maintained ship can get to where you need to go relatively easily. But of course, a ship with a hole in it, you're gonna have some issues. So from a top level, I believe that we need to really look at the policies. I went to school for public policy, so this is how I have to approach it. But we need to be plugging some of these policy holes that our city has insofar as things that have been neglected over the years. And then at the bottom level, really the grassroots level rather, I think people need to realize that that past is attainable. What once was can be again, and it can be even better, right? And I think that really goes towards people such as Joe Whittington really sharing that story of what it used to be like and connecting the young and the old so that there is a tangible connection to this past that often seems more mythical than real. So.
Okay. Well, you know what? And, talking about a past, because of course there's the village, there's all the wonderful things that's been done in the city of Harvey over all of these years. But at the same time, Harvey is also facing challenges, and we can definitely, just looking back, over the past decade or two, remember issues of that we've had amongst our leaders, amongst leadership, and how they brought us to some of what we have now. I think, and I'll say before passing it on, that a lot of that was just a teachable moment for us to bring us to where we are today, so that we can learn from the things that we had experienced, but also learn not to do those things again. But we're familiar with that. But what would you say? What would you all say is probably the biggest challenge that we faced as a city? Joe, I'll start with you.
The vision. I remember being able to, when I became an elected official, I was able to go down to Springfield to see what Representative Will Davis was doing and how government actually functions. Then came back here trying to figure out how do I implement ideas by working with other aldermen and alderwomen. Your question was the challenges of Harvey. The vision that I thought we were going to do was part of that civil rights period. What they were doing in Atlanta, how they was restructuring. I thought Harvey could do that, and I believe that we could have hotels where people can visit, come here and stay in Harvey and party here. I thought we would have Mardi Gras, things like Jamaica. I saw an economical booming community like Vegas, but I was confused, but it didn't go that way quickly. The housing stopped. With some beautiful homes. I, as an elected official, I knew everybody in those houses. I had to know them, but now I lost them. I didn't understand what do we get money for to build up the infrastructure of a city that's 125 years old in its foundation. I didn't know how to get the money. I didn't know what ideas to put in. I had to learn the craft of being an elected official, going to municipality classes, finding out about budgets and finance, like all of us on this panel here, all of us. It was a learning curve for me. What was our future going to be when we got the roads built? That was a sign there. The railroads, CNN railroads, was able to move forward. Trucks were coming here. I saw places where we can house truckers, house railroad people. I wanted those dreams. As an African American, I wanted to see that. It didn't go that way. I networked with the different businesses, because Second Ward was the biggest ward in Harvey. So I thought I had to, well, I was trained to go there by the block club presidents. They demanded me to reach out and network. So I had to learn about debt, how to get money, and I didn't understand that, did we have any money? Or if we did, how come we wasn't using it properly?
That sounds like a lot of challenges.
Yeah, yeah.
Here at Joe. Not just one in particular, but and we know that, you know, over the years, because, well, you became an alderman in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was over that, I would say, probably challenging
It was challenging.
period. And your perspective as an alderman at that particular point in time. But Rep. Davis, you weren't an alderman at that time. You were just coming into your own as a state representative. What do you think were some of the biggest challenges that, you know, we faced as a city?
Well, from so being a new state rep in 2003, I'm learning as well, trying to figure out how this works. And even today, still trying to figure out some aspects of it in terms of how it works. But I think one thing that I would say in terms of walking into the office that presented itself as a challenge was what I'll call the grassroots disconnect.
Mm.
So when you have a community, and this is going back to then, so my data is kind of reflecting early 2000s. So when you had a community of almost 30,000 people, approximately 50% of them are registered voters, but then in any given election, only 5,000 people vote.
Mm.
That's a real disconnect. Now, and at that time, Harvey was still a strong community, meaning that it had a nice population of seniors. You know, it had a growing middle class, and the younger folks, you know, they were becoming of age. So when you think about the people who really could actually participate in the governmental process, that was a decent number of people. But for whatever reason, and maybe just how they perceived, or, you know, that growing disillusionment with government that I also saw happening, they just wouldn't participate in the process. Now, many would talk about the process, dare I say complain about the process, but then when you ask the question, like, are you participating in the process? If they were willing to share with you, the answer was often, no, I'm not. It's like, well, why not? Well, I don't trust them. I don't, you know, I don't like what they're doing. And the reality is that, well, you actually can change that if you really wanted to, you know, and if you didn't like who was there, you could actually cultivate the next generation of leaders, of people who you would want to see in those positions to do those kinds of things. Folks that would pay closer attention to the seniors and listen, you know, because they brought such a different perspective. Because when you're talking about seniors, in Harvey, you're talking about seniors who acknowledged when Harvey was that community you spoke of, David. You know, acknowledged when Dixie Mall was thriving. You know, one of the first malls, I think, in the nation, if you will. So they saw it like that. Now, did we get hurt by, you know, the industrial decline because Harvey had steel mills, you know, people that worked really good jobs, raised their families, hardworking blue-collar folks. And when that broader climate of that change that Harvey suffered, absolutely, but it didn't pivot well. It didn't figure out, well, what's the next move industry-wise for us that we could continue to sustain ourselves. It didn't go that way. And so when those jobs went away, you did start to see people move away. And the housing stock, that was pristine, did start to decline a little bit. So, you could say there were some broader economic factors that contributed to that, but I would argue that in some other communities in the state of Illinois that saw those kinds of fluctuations, they didn't lose their pride. They didn't lose their desire to still have a great community and to work to build their community. They were still doing all the things that Joe said. They were still out there sweeping the streets, in front of their homes, picking up trash in the lots around. They were still doing those things. But unfortunately, that mentality lost its way in Harvey. And then you also then started to see the decline in government, as well, where it became more about, instead of thinking broadly about what I should be doing for the betterment of the entire community, it just became more selfish at the time. What can I do for me, or certain people, what have you, and all of that, started to mix, and again, that's when you started to see people lose that confidence in their government and lose confidence in what they thought government should do. And everything, not since I've been in office necessarily, but dare I say since you've been in office, have been about trying to rebuild those things, trying to put that back together. And it's been tough because you still have a segment of folks that liked it when it wasn't good, but they liked it that way. And that's some of what you're fighting right now, is those folks that liked it that way. And not that I know all of the history of Harvey. I obviously have my version of that history. But when I tell people about, the city of Harvey and talk about it on the floor of the House, and the desire for communities like this to reemerge, to have that rebirth, that Phoenix moment, if you will. And I say that in context because they're questioning the things that I'm trying to do in Springfield. But when you've been in a community that never had those issues before, you can't possibly understand what communities like this have been through. We can talk about the history of it and they go, oh, that was a great history. But then you got to fast forward a little bit and say, but this is where we are now. And my objective and my job is to see what I can do from a policy perspective. And that's important to say because as much as we talk about advocacy in government, policy truly is what really drives how all of this works.
Correct.
And I've kind of come to that epiphany, if you will, over the last few years about looking at what I do from a policy perspective, in addition to being an advocate. I'm fortunate enough to chair an appropriations committee, and though it's K through 12, but being in that conversation about the budget overall has just really opened my eyes to how some of this stuff gets done, and how I got to figure out how to position myself in a way where I can be a better advocate for cities like Harvey and others in the 30th district, because we've got great people, got great history, we've got eager people, we've got a new generation of leaders coming up, and we need to leave them a legacy, where they can then take it almost like the relay race, take that baton and then move that baton the next 100 yards or the next 200 or 400, whichever race you're running. But we've got to figure out how to do that legacy. I am a beneficiary of those public schools here in Harvey. Well, it wasn't Maya Angelou back then, it was actually Emerson.
That's right.
That might predate you a little bit, but it was Emerson Elementary School that then became Maya Angelou.
Emerson Eagles.
Emerson Eagles. And then I too graduated from Brooks, but I was the first class of students who graduated from Brooks. So I got that, I had that pride in being in that first class. And that's when we worked to make sure that the school was new. It was something about having it new, that made us take that pride and want to keep it looking that way, and wanting to do things like that. But challenges, it all kind of comes back to people. That's a lesson that I've learned in government, is that and not that policy isn't important, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's about the people you represent and what they want, what they desire, and how you interact with them. they understand the policy side of it a little bit, but more importantly, it's about when your phone rings in the office and that person, whether they be senior or young or whatever, is having that challenge with government, what can you do to help fix that problem? That's what truly is important right now. And as much as I can do that to try to help rebuild that confidence that people have in government, that it is responsive, that it will answer my questions, whether it's the answer I wanted or the answer I didn't want, and now I have an answer. Now I can figure out how to move forward from there.
And you were going to say something, Joe?
Can I tag in on that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Education, oh God, how blessed we are to get it. From my experience, and you just mentioned policy. Policy sets the guidelines, but personnel, having the right people in the city to care about the city goes a long way. Graduating, in other words you use, graduating your kids up to see that they can stay in the community, buy a house, and live here. And I see a few of them, but all of them should have been working here. If the city was to be the futuristic city, which I dreamed of to be. As an African American, I got to stand on it. I'm tired of the word ghetto. I'm tired of people talking about old stuff, but not talking about a solution to the problem. We do have it, but now we got to focus on the future.
Well, you know, it is, like the both of you have said and articulated, you know, policy and the people is really important. You know, when I look at the policy and I look at the people, and I'm going to get to you in a minute, David, it's really a situation of who drives what? Does the policy drive the people, or do the people drive the policy? And there's probably that chicken and egg argument that's out there. But I know that when I grew up in Harvey, the policy was that we took care of each other.
Good.
And it wasn't a written policy. It was just something that was intrinsic in the people in the neighborhood. So I could go home and, well, first of all, so I like to tell people I'm a HACO baby, you know,
HACO.
which is, Harvey Area Community Organization. You know, I like to tell people that because I spent a lot of time in that environment. But also when I'm going home, and I had the little shoestring around my neck with the key on the end, you know, to get into the house, there were other people that were looking out for me, even though I always thought I was by myself. You know, and so, but that was the policy. The policy said that there were certain things that we did as a community, and certain things that we did not do as a community. And so those written policies, the written part was not necessary because we had them on our hearts. Over the years, things have changed. And as the people have changed, it has become necessary, in my opinion, to implement additional policies to tell us to not do things that we originally would not have done anyway, and to do things that we normally would have done. You couldn't you couldn't be 18 years old in my family and not vote. That couldn't happen. Not be registered to vote and then not vote? Never. It just wouldn't happen. You know, that's like me thinking that I'm not going to church on Sunday and I'm not going to vacation Bible school. You know what I'm saying? In the summertime. Those things are given. Those things are going to happen regardless of what type of resistance I may put up as a child, even though I want to go off and I want to go bike riding with my friends.
So
no. You're going to church on Sunday and you're going to vacation Bible school in the summertime. You know, and you're going to vote when you get to be 18, and you're going to make sure you register for the armed forces. and no one had to reinforce that.
No,
It
no.
was there. It was written in stone.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So now, things have changed, and so the policies have had to be implemented to start to make us do things that we should normally be doing as a symbol of love
Yeah.
and admiration for each other,
Yeah.
and love and admiration for our communities. And so, what I'm getting now is, the challenges that we're facing is how do we take those unwritten rules from, say, for instance, back then. And I'm going to be honest, not every unwritten rule in the city of Harvey was a pleasant rule, because there was also unwritten rules that said that I couldn't go to certain places in Harvey because of the color of my skin. So we still had to deal with that as well. But we take the bad, we throw it out. We take the good, we keep it. And how do we take that good part and begin to write that good part in a way that it begins to influence people, who are coming up after us? And so, of course, that throws the ball to you, David, to try to figure out, you're coming up in a period in a time where you don't have that, you don't have that historical base, but you're still able to see some of the things that are going on. So I ask you the same question. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that we face as a city?
Personally speaking, from what I see and what I've saw and what I'm continuing to see every day, is that we are under a demographic challenge right now. Brain drain in particular. You talk about these policies and you talk about the personnel to operationalize and go out into the field to make it happen, but we aren't attracting those kinds of people who can do that, let alone want to do that. People my age, for example, 24 for the audience, a 24-year-old who has gone to college, who has done well in high school, or who is just looking for a well-paying job, Harvey is not on their radar, unfortunately. If you want to start building your family, Harvey is still not on your radar. All these things that the city needs to grow and move forward, Harvey is not on the map for any of that, unfortunately. Not yet, at least. But that is something that we need to look at overcoming. The attraction of younger people, young professionals, young talent, whether it's the white collar or the blue collar, whatever collar they have, as long as they're working, to come here and invest, really set down their roots and allow for a force to grow, a force, a community, a village, really. But yeah, my answer to that would be the brain drain epidemic that we're having right now. That's the biggest challenge.
Well, all right. I mean, you heard it. I mean, that's, you said a lot in a very short period of time. And I hope that other, people in your age demographic, I hope that they're watching this. I hope that they'll take the time to watch this. But I also hope, as a leader, that they will come out and actually start to inject themselves into the process. Excuse me. I will honestly say that when I was growing up, one of the things that I always would recognize is that the people who were older than me sometimes wanted to hang on to it for so long that it didn't leave any room for any of the younger people to get involved.
Right.
And so then the younger people would go off and find something else to do. And of course, that just didn't happen in the city of Harvey, but it happened in other organizations, other communities, things of that nature, where the younger people need to be involved in every aspect.
Right.
And as a leader of the city of Harvey, I want to make sure everyone knows, without a shadow of a doubt, that we need that input. We need that young perspective. We need you.
Yeah.
Bottom line, we need you.
We do.
And if we are going to continue to be around for another 130 years, we can't do it without you. So,
Right.
so I thank you for answering that. But all of that being said, during this time, the city has also made some tremendous strides since this administration has taken office. And we are right next door to us. We're building a 51-unit apartment complex, which we haven't seen in an extremely long time. We have approximately 300 million. Yeah, thank you. 300 million in investment opportunities available. We have projects such as Wood Street, Dixie Highway. I was so excited this weekend because Dixie Highway, they finally took off the first layer of the pavement, and they're getting ready to repave Dixie Highway, so that's absolutely wonderful. But we're also looking at a decrease in, in police activities, criminal activities. Those things are going down. So we're seeing a lot of, I'd say positive strides as well. Things that would help to make young people say, hey, maybe I want to look at, this type of community. But also the types of things that make our seniors in our I'd say 30 to 35 to 50 demographic to say, hey, look, and this is a place that I can be proud of, and this is a place that I'd like to stay. But looking ahead, and I'm going to start with you, seeing that we finished off with you, what do you think is our biggest opportunity for growth and for Harvey to actually shine?
Biggest opportunity for growth. I feel like we have quite a few avenues to growth, really, for exponential growth. One thing that I've seen that I believe will continue under your leadership has been competency in the main office. I was talking to Joe about this a little earlier. When you have these people who want to invest their time, energy, and of course capital in the city of Harvey, they want to see that they're making a good investment. And putting in place the structures to allow for that confidence are extremely important. That looks like transit-oriented development plans. That looks like having people on these important committees to make sure that things are moving smoothly and that there won't be an unnecessary holdup. That looks like transparent government. That looks like accountable government, and ultimately a government that goes out to interact and touch the people, right? All of these things, and plenty others, I'm missing quite a few, all of these things matter so much, but I think the one aspect that the city of Harvey is gaining every day is competency. And that will open, if not every door, many, many doors to growth for the city of Harvey, in my opinion.
All right, well, what about you, Rep. Davis?
Well, one thing, again, I've come to appreciate is that government sometimes can have fast-acting things, but it's a slow and steady kind of effort sometimes. It takes repetition. It takes a level of consistency. It takes, again, I mentioned advocacy earlier, but, and what I mean by that is that as these great things that you're doing start to come on, it requires you to be its biggest cheerleader, to be quite honest with you. One thing that my mother used to say, and it kind of holds true even today, is that it's a sad dog that won't wag his own tail.
Yeah.
So you've got to be out there talking about the good things and being part of that public face of the city, so that my colleagues can see it and hear it. Our seniors can see it and hear it. And I'm not trying to drop you into that category.
I am seeing it. I'm taking
and that younger generation can see it as well and see it on the move.
Proud.
And they can then see what the opportunities are for them as an individual, or whether it's to have a family, whatever that may be. I mean, what you're doing now, transit-oriented development that David mentioned, which is building Harvey Laws, but also the transformation of the transportation center in downtown Harvey between Pace and Metro. White communities are doing this stuff all the time. So it's not necessarily new. It may be new to us to some degree, but white communities are doing this all the time. And when they start doing it, other folks go, wow, okay, something's happening over there. They're growing, they're moving. Maybe I need to start looking at what's happening over there. And then you couple that with, you being that main voice out there talking about what the opportunities are. It works. If it can work for other communities, it sure can work for the city of Harvey. And I've said this before. An example of that is just 2 2 metro stops down the road in Homewood, because they're doing the exact same thing. So it's not a novelty for black communities to do this. They just got to do it. And what you've been able to find is the cooperation necessary in the city council to get it done. You know, I hope city council people know that, you know, while I'm not saying that everybody has to agree, but they also have to have a sole purpose in mind, and that's for their community to grow.
Yes.
And if they have that in mind, we can get past disagreements. But the bigger picture is what needs to play out, and what is happening here, and what is playing out. Roads are important. You know, we mentioned 159th Street with the redoing of the viaduct many years ago to allow more traffic to roll through. You mentioned, you know, upgrades on Dixie Highway. You know, the movement on Wood Street, that it'll be a complete reconstruction of Wood Street that will provide gutters and sewers in places where it didn't have them to help address flooding issues. Even the I get retention and detention kind of mixed up sometimes, but the NWRD project that's going on here, people have to understand that $10 million investment, I can guarantee you that the white community to the west will be more than happy to have it if they don't want it.
Right.
And then
Right,
if they fight it and it goes away,
Right,
what are we
right,
going to be
right,
left with?
right.
The same flooding
We'll still
that
be
we're
flooding.
trying to deal with right now. But that money may not come around as quickly this time again as it has this time. So we have to be able to, feel a certain way about things, but understand that there's all of this is so much bigger than who we are as individuals. And if we're not figuring out how to work together, then Harvey will continue to see that kind of upswing. But then if you fight it too much, it's just gonna go down again. And climbing back up is a lot harder to try to get back to the top again than it is to try to come to getting down to the bottom. So they have to acknowledge that, and hopefully they're starting to see that, I can, what do you say, disagree without being disagreeable, you know, that kind of thing. But with the sole purpose in mind that it's all about growing our city, growing this city in particular, so it can then continue to be. All the tools are here. You've got land for growth. You've got the convergence of the transportation, whether it be roads, rail, commuter rail. It's all
Everything right here.
It's all here, and so folks have to be able to take that step back and look at the big picture of putting all of this together, you know, so that we can see this city continue to be that beacon in the south suburbs that we know it has been and is working to continue to be.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely wonderful. We're going to kind of wrap it up here, but before we do, I just want to say, you know, look, we're at a stage right now where even people are learning how to express themselves. We've gone for so long, for so many years, without having the ability where people can actually become engaged, that sometimes they don't quite know what being disagreeable is or what true advocacy is versus being argumentative. But we're learning those things, and it's a growing pain. But one thing I can be guaranteed that I've seen so far is that the city, and especially the council in general, is sticking together to help move this city forward. So, gentlemen, you know, it's been an interesting and engaging conversation. We've only skimmed the surface, and there's so much more to talk about. But because you're true public servants, I know this won't be the last conversation that we will have about building a better Harvey. And with that being said, I hope this isn't your last appearance on Let's Talk Harvey, and I want to thank you all again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So join us next time as we continue the series on telling Harvey's story. We'll continue to explore its rich history and its current state of affairs. I'm your host, Mayor Christopher J. Clark, and I thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.